if somebody brings me a deal to lend on it, would I have bought that deal myself? And if the answer is yes, I'll lend on it. Because what's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to default. I have to foreclose on it, and now I have a property that I would have bought myself. So as long as I don't over leverage on that property, I'm eliminating all the risk that I'm concerned with.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Probate House Guy podcast. I'm Brad Woodall, the Probate House Guy. We're getting back into our real estate investor episodes here. And today I've got my buddy Jason Seward out of Virginia with me today. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Brad, what's up, man? I'm happy to be here.
Appreciate that. We actually just recorded a podcast episode on yours just a minute ago. We're just rolling back to back with this today. That's great.
That's right.
So I understand you were similar to me, and your podcast is the Burning the Boats podcast, right? You and I both burned the boats, left corporate America. So why don't you kind of talk about, your evolution as a real estate investor and where you were and where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And again, thank you for having me on here. I love talking shop, and like you mentioned, our podcast, we actually just recently within the last month had to tweak the name a little bit from Burning the Boats to Burning the Ships. There was already a Burning the Boats out there that was copyrighted. So we had, and we worked with them. We communicated with them. They were very gracious and letting us keep a similar title, but not the same.
Yeah.
But having said that, yeah, I burned my ships, from corporate America at the end of 2022. And prior to that, pretty much right out of college, I went to work for an insurance company here in Virginia. And just selling property and casualty and life insurance. And that evolved into more of a management role. And then, once I left in 2022, I had a pretty large sales team and still have my own book of business. And I was there about 17-ish years. But early on in that career, I'll go back. My grandmother was a local real estate agent in our area that was, I was always in and around it through her, even as a child. Like she'd be having open houses. I'd be in the mulch bed, putting mulch down, right before people showed up. So I was in the weeds with real estate from her perspective at an early age and always just had an interest in it. She pushed me very aggressively at an early age, like, real estate's where it's at. You need to, no matter what, whether it's on the side or your main thing, be involved or be close to real estate. So I had that in my mind very early on. And when I graduated college, soon after, like I went back home, lived with my mom, and, obviously like a lot of people do, but I wanted to get out of that situation as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. So I found a house or a single wide trailer in my hometown, that was renting for $450 a month. It was a 1972 trailer, and it hadn't been updated since 1972. So it was just a piece. Yeah. Oh yeah. So I started renting that, and my grandma right away, she was like, you got to go to the owner, see if he'll sell it to you. You don't need to be renting that thing. I said, okay, well, I don't know how to do that. And she kind of, led me down the steps that I need to take. We'll go to him and see if he'll own or finance. And if he won't do that, then we'll figure this out. So I did that and ended up buying that property and got some bank financing on it. And my payment and everything was like $425 a month. So I was paying less than what my rent was. And I was like, okay, I'm in this thing now, man. Real estate's where it's at. So that was my first taste of actual success with real estate. I ended up moving that trailer out, building my first house on it. Okay. Soon after that, at this point, I'm going in my insurance career. So, found a house through a client that passed away, old farmhouse that the only way I was going to be able to buy that was to sell the house I had just built. So I did that. And then that started a several year process of my wife and I buying a house, doing basically live-in fix and flips, right? So we'd buy them, we'd fix them up, sell them, move on. And I think we moved our first 6 years of marriage, we moved 7 times, I believe. So it was, and half of that time we had a baby, so we had a young toddler that we were dragging house to house. Yeah. And then that I had a goal at that point, and the only goal was to buy a farm in my hometown and build a house on. So each house was just building towards that.
Sure.
And finally, in 2015, we accomplished that goal. I bought the land in 2012. 15, we built the house. Still in that house to this day. It's our dream house in my hometown. And then I hit pause. Like, I had accomplished my real estate goals, if you will.
Sure.
Still working in my career that was pretty demanding. And then in 2018, I got introduced to a couple different podcasts and books around real estate and investing and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was then that I was like, all right, I can build something here. And at the time, it was just a supplement to my job, you know.
Sure.
So at that time, I leaned in on the BRRRR strategy. So I went all in on that, using my cash, home equity line of credit, and just buying houses, fixing them up, refinancing them, and just repeating that over and over.
Yep.
Did several of those, 2018, 19. And then Bill Phillips and I, Bill was a good friend of mine, lifelong friend. We joined forces in 2020 to basically combine our resources, and instead of doing one or two at a time, we started doing 3 to 5 at a time. And then that eventually kind of took off from there. And really the whole time, we were not buying to leave our job. We were building a portfolio to supplement retirement, to maybe retire when we were in our early 50s kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, as it started scaling, it was pretty quick to realize, like, man, we're building a lot of equity with all this, and our net worth is just skyrocketing. We've got something here that maybe we could tweak a few things and leave our jobs, you know, or be in a position to do so sooner than we thought.
Sure.
So that escalated pretty quickly. We bought our first multifamily property in 2022. That was a apartment in Norfolk, Virginia. Did that. And then it was right after that, we joined our first like big mastermind. We had done some smaller like mentorship type deals, but it was our first big mastermind. Joined that, got into that room, and it was game on. We were able to run the numbers, realize that we were in a good enough position with our net worth, the equity we had in these properties, the cash flow we had, and our savings, because both of us have been very frugal, throughout the year. So we had about a 5-year runway just in savings.
Wow.
And so once it just took hearing it from other people that were a little bit ahead of us, like, y'all are way ahead of where you need to be able to leave your jobs, and put the pieces together. And, it was end of 2022. He had to wait a little bit, because he was due a bonus, and I know you alluded to this, but he had to stay on until the date of the bonus being paid in order to get that bonus. Yeah. But we both, by early last year, we were out and on our own.
So on that topic about bonuses, I got screwed. I didn't know that. But when I left my corporate job, I left in January of 2018. At the January 18th was my last day, because I gave my boss like a 60-day notice, give him plenty of runway to get a replacement hired and blah, 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 blah. And I didn't read the fine print about my bonus. It was like a $15,000 bonus. And I left January 18th, and our bonus got paid out like third week in February was when our bonus got paid out every year. Well, a bonus payout comes, I didn't get it, and I called HR, and they're like, you don't get the bonus. You weren't there on the day of the payout. And I'm like, but I worked all of 2017.
Right.
I worked the whole year. What do you mean? They're like, no, you have to, right here it says you have to be there on the day of the payout. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah. And I had a similar situation, although I knew it because in my job, I had a team that I managed. So we had people quite a few times leave at the end of the year expecting to get paid a bonus. So I saw how that went down. My bonus that I had earned for that particular year wasn't significant enough for me to hang on for another 4 months, so I elected, but my business partners was, and so he hung on, but yeah, man, we did that, and it was game on. We knew that we we had this window of time that we had enough personal capital to buy ourselves enough time to build something that eventually would equal what we were leaving and exceed that. But more than anything else, man, I mean, the numbers played a big factor because, I mean, we had families to feed and bills to pay. Sure. But it was just the time and the mental freedom that we gained from doing it. And that, above all else, took priority. And that was kind of the final straw. As soon as we got our wives on board, once they were on board, it was game on, and we haven't looked back at all. So,
I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, I had a good paying 6-figure corporate job and the golden handcuffs, and my wife thought I was crazy to leave, but I was like, look, I don't want to do this forever. I don't want, I'm looking at my boss, who I didn't really care for the guy, but like, he's in his 50s and like just grinding away, and he's sitting there bragging about how he comes in at 6:30 in the morning and doesn't leave till 8 o'clock at night. I'm like, what? That's crazy. I don't want to do that. Like, I'm not going to be here all day long for what? You're going to get 2% bonus next year, like, or 2% pay raise? Right. Like, no, that's crazy.
And it's some people, most people, I shouldn't say some, most human beings thrive off that security, stability. And I get it. Like, that's why it took me so long to even think about doing something on my own, because like I've always at heart and in my mind, I've always had an entrepreneurial mindset, even within the corporate structure. Like I would get my hand slapped sometimes because I would try to implement things that, or create things within a corporate structure that it had no place to be there. Yeah. So I was always battling this desire for creative control, and never being able to scratch that itch. And so it wasn't, for me, it was just about like I said earlier, that mental freedom and flexibility to act on thoughts that I had, act on creativity. And that ultimately, is what led me out. So.
Oh, there were so many times. I remember one time and this was like one of the straws, right? That me and my boss, I worked for a major wireless carrier, and I was a fraud investigator for like 10 years before I left to go into real estate. And we had come up with this whole basically investigations team in this new like kind of niche that I had uncovered and discovered all this stuff and the way these people were stealing and doing these identity theft rings and all this stuff. And we basically created this team, and it was based on, I was an analytics guy, I was a data guy, I'm very well versed in SQL and all that stuff, self-taught, all that stuff. And I was like, we had presented a team to the upper management and said, here's this team of like 4 people. I was going to manage, because I had tapped out on my pay grade. I couldn't go any higher in the group we were in. I like, there was nowhere, I hit the ceiling, right? And and our group was, these people have been there forever. So unless someone died, I wasn't like going to get a promotion, right? So 2 years in a row, we pitched this new team to the big bosses and said, Brad's going to manage this group, right? That would get me into the next pay grade, because then I would be like because I was an individual contributor manager, and then I would be like a manager of people. So then I could bump into the next pay grade. And I would manage this team of analysts. I was like they all called me like the super analyst, right? So I would manage the team of analysts, and we would build this team, and we'd go after all these types of fraud that were affecting the company. And we ran the numbers, and here's our travel budget. I mean, we've spelled it out, man, like payroll, travel budget. Here's what we're going to save the company. I mean, it was like a 10x ROI. 10x. Right. Like, that's crazy. And they were like, no. And I'm what do you mean? 2 years in a row, he pitched it. And finally, after that second year, when they said no, I said, I'm leaving this company because there's no future from here. I left to another company. That job was terrible. And then I left that company. I was only there for like 12 months, left there. They were trying to beg me to stay and throw in money at me. And I was like, I don't want your money. I want mental, like stability. Right. And I left, and that was when I started my real estate stuff. When I went to that like more laid back job, I could mentally focus on building a business and building this side hustle and growing something that I could get out of,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, and my situation is unique in the sense where I honestly, I cannot say enough good things about my job. I had a great job as corporate jobs go. I was very, I had done a good job in sales. I was developing into a respected leader in the company. I loved, I mean, there wasn't a level of leadership above me all the way to my CEO that I wasn't very close to, and I respected them all. I loved them. Like, they were family to me. They watched me grow up. I started with them when I was 23 years old.
Sure.
So that, in my situation, the hardest part of leaving was feeling like I was walking away from a family,
Sure.
So that was difficult for me, very difficult. I remember the day that and this was very awkward because it was the day that I let my big boss, the senior VP of sales, know, who he actually coincidentally was one that hired me umpteen years ago. But I had to let him know that I was leaving. He was going to be the first one I told. I hadn't told anybody else in the company.
Yeah.
But the first time I was going to be around him to tell him was at a new agent conference where I was a speaker to the new agents. So I had to get on stage and present to all these new agents to fire them up about this new job they're embarking on in this great company.
Yeah.
I get them all fired up. I knock it out of the park. Everybody leaves the room. Me and him have a meeting scheduled afterwards, and then I drop the bomb on him. And I remember feeling like it was emotional for me because, like, here I am. He's putting this young up and coming leader that's the future of the company on stage to speak to these new agents. And then 10 minutes later, I'm telling him I'm leaving. And that was a really rough patch for me. But I got through all that. And ultimately, I have no regrets. I burned the ships, but I didn't burn any bridges with that company or anything like that. I'm still very close with all of them. So.
Yeah. Same here. I still talk to a lot of my former colleagues.
Yeah.
Actually, my boss that tried to help me present that at the telecommunications company, he and I still chat. We shoot together. We go fishing together sometimes. Like we still stay connected to this day.
Right.
So, yeah, man, that's so cool. So now you've basically, I mean, you grew a very sizable rental portfolio. 120 doors. That's a pretty significant rental portfolio, right? That's some good stuff, and building up the equity. And then you kind of got those. We all know that rentals are not like passive by any means, but they're pretty passive, right? But not totally passive. And you got that in management, and now you've basically started a fund. So why don't you talk about the evolution of a fund, and for maybe people that don't understand what a fund is and how that works, like how did that all come about?
Sure. So specific to a fund, I mean, there's so many different types of fund. What we have is what's called a real estate debt fund, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but I'll kind of go back to how that started. So it's three of us, three partners in the fund: myself, Tim Blodgett, and Bill Phillips. And our rental portfolio, again, all of us have been building that together, and some, we each individually have a few properties on our own, but Bill and I, along the way, we were lending some of our own private capital to other fix and flippers in our area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then we really ramped that up. When I left my job at the end of 22, I had to roll my 401k into a self-directed account. Well, prior to that, it's a corporate sponsored 401k. So the only thing I could invest in were index funds and stock market related stuff.
Real estate, they have the real estate fund in there.
Right. Yeah. The REITs and stuff like that. But I had, that was kind of, for years, I had maxed it out, set it and forget it, getting a decent average returns and never even paying attention to it. But, you figure 17 years of that, it accumulated quite a bit. So I had a big chunk of money to figure out what I was going to self-direct it into now that it wasn't company sponsored. So I decided to allocate quite a bit of it to hard money loans, and I started lending out of my self-directed account. Prior to that, I didn't even know that was a thing. So
most people don't.
Right. And so I started doing that and quickly realized, like, man, there's a lot of there's pretty heavy returns here if you structure it right. And it's relatively risk-free, especially when I'm lending on stuff that I'm also buying myself. So like all the risk involved are things that, so for example, like my main mindset when I would decide whether or not to lend on something is, if somebody brings me a deal to lend on it, would I have bought that deal myself? And if the answer is yes, I'll lend on it. Because what's the worst thing that's going to happen? They're going to default. I have to foreclose on it, and now I have a property that I would have bought myself. So as long as I don't over leverage on that property, I'm eliminating all the risk that I'm concerned with. So we start doing this, Bill doing the same thing, and we start doing the numbers. And let me go back. When we left our jobs, our first, like, we were going to dive all in on apartment syndication or commercial real estate syndication. We had bought a few multifamily deals, small, and we were going to scale that up into bigger deals. Well, we decided to hit pause on that because things were getting a little quirky with the interest rates and things like that. And we were going to lean in to this lending world to see if there was enough legs here to actually develop this into a profitable business. We knew that it was, but we just didn't know how to structure it. So our first move was we connected with Kelly Garrett, who runs Rehab Wallet out of Charleston, South Carolina. And they are a a couple $100 million debt fund. We were aware of their reputation. We knew that not just their reputation as lenders, but their reputation as people. And we knew that if we were going to sync up with any type of mentor, she was the one. Reached out to her. She agreed to come on as a consultant. So we basically hired her right out of the gate to consult our growth of our business, from day one. So she comes in. We go through the whole process of registering with the SEC. We worked with an SEC attorney, did all of that to set up a fund. And at the highest level, like most simplistic form I can explain it, the way we are set up is investors, accredited investors who have to meet certain criteria to be considered accredited. But they got to have certain income thresholds or net worth threshold. But we take their capital, they invest into our fund in one of three classes, paying 8, 9, or 10%. We pay them a monthly return on their money. They don't have any operational control. They don't want it. They just want the returns. And we take and pool all of their capital. So let's say we've got 30 investors at, whatever amounts they want to invest. Well, now we have this bucket of money. And out of that bucket, we are making hard money loans. So we're already we already have our customer base because we've been lending to these people and through networking groups and stuff, building these networks for a while. And we just offer them a product that is competitive in whatever market they're in. And, so we're making loans, usually a 6-month loan at a couple points and an interest that is creating a spread above what we're paying our investors, and that's our profit. So there's a lot that goes into that as far as like structuring out how it all operates. But that's why we hired Kelly Garrett to help us structure all that. But that is in its simplest form. We bring in money from investors, we lend it out, we pay them a return, and we make a profit. And that's the most simplest way I can put it. So
and Kelly helped you guys really build the business around lending, right?
100%.
Because you got to have systems and processes. You got to make sure, you got to have a process to verify that they've got adequate hazard insurance, because the worst you want is that house to burn down and they're out the money, right? How do you verify that? How do you make sure the loan docs are right? How do you make sure, get things to the title company? There's a lot of mechanics in the business of lending compared to a lot of my lenders are like what you guys were doing, right? Like I get a lot of my money from, a lot of people have self-directed IRAs and self-directed 401ks. And they literally I call them and say, hey, I need, $250,000. We're closing with the same attorney I always close with. Here's the deal. Here's the numbers. I've been doing this a long time. They know that I don't buy bad deals. Not to say that I haven't lost money on a few deals here and there over the years. It happens. But for the most part, I'm a very conservative investor about buying deals. So they were like, hey, I always get paid back by Brad. So yeah, we'll do the next one. They get loan docs on everything. I'm always securing them to the property. And, but now you guys are just taking that to the next level, right?
That's it. Yeah.
And just using other people's money to grow that, right?
That's exactly right. And it's, in its simplest form, again, it's really not much different than, you think about your local bank. Well, they're taking money on deposit, right? And they're paying, a couple percentage points on that money that's sitting in a savings account, and they're making car loans with it, right? And they're making a spread there. It's the exact same concept. The biggest difference is the bank doesn't want to take back that car. They don't want to take back that house, nor do we, but we are still very active in the markets in which we lend, so much so, or because now as we've scaled, we've spread out across the country. We have connections in the markets that we lend in, so that if we were to have to take something back, we're comfortable doing so. And it's, from a systems and processes standpoint, that's where we needed the help, because we were doing loans really, it was just a promissory note, and that's pretty much it. Well, now we have a very robust set of documents. There's checks and balances. There's a lot of things we go through as far as underwriting, but at the end of the day, it's the same thing. It's just a little more buttoned up than when we were lending our own capital. So
yeah, you're just making a little bit more official, right?
Yep,
for sure.
Right.
So, like, to create, I've been, it's on my to-do list. I want to set up a fund for, basically, as we're expanding this probate footprint across the country and buying deals in other markets. I want to create a fund to basically just buy all these deals, and our exit strategy is basically wholesaling them all, right? So that's and you probably have specific criteria set, or like, we'll loan on this, but we won't loan on this, right?
Right.
And Kelly probably helped you define that, put that on paper. You already had it in your head, probably. She just helped you put it on paper. So to set a fund up, like, what you mentioned, you had to hire a securities attorney and all that, like, how long does that typically take? How much does that usually cost? Like, and there's different types of funds. So
yeah, sure. So and again, that's important to note, because there's the type of fund you're thinking about is quite a bit different than what we're doing. But at the end of the day, it's very similar in the sense that, number one, you're going to have to work with an SEC attorney. Okay, so they're going to have to draw up a private placement memorandum, a PPM.
Right.
Which, for folks that may be a little more familiar with like stocks, it's like your prospectus with a stock, right? Sure. And in that PPM, it's going to identify everything you're doing, right? It's going to, from an investor standpoint. So these are the returns you're going to earn. These are the risk involved, very detailed with all the risk involved. And it defines what we can and can't do as operators. You can be, that can be as custom as you want it. Sure. So our fund is pretty much, we have to have a lien position on anything we lend on. And that's it. So I can't go and make you an unsecured loan to Brad for $100,000 because my fund PPM doesn't allow me to do that. Right. But to work through that process, your first step is getting with an SEC attorney. And I don't mind sharing, we used the Vincent brothers out of Cleveland, Ohio. They were phenomenal. And they're going to charge a fee depending on, like, they helped us set up everything, like our operating agreement, our LLC, our documents, for the PPM, all of that. And I think we paid somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 grand for all that.
Okay.
And then that comes with some back end services of, like, we've changed our investor offering a couple times as we've grown into the fund. So we go back to them, say, hey, can we tweak the PPM to, instead of 8% in this class, let's go to 9%, instead of 9, 10, that type of thing. Right. And once that's set up, once you start bringing on investors into the fund, you have to have some kind of, like, we used InvestNext to manage our investors. So it's a third-party portal that they can have a login, they can have an account, they can see their account balances, they can make deposits and withdrawals through InvestNext, all of that. And all of their documents are housed in there too, because they're going to have to sign that PPM. They're going to have to sign a subscription agreement identifying how many units they want to buy or how many shares or however you're set up. But from start to finish, like when we decided we're moving forward with this to actually being live with the fund, about 60 days. It wasn't that long of a process. No.
Not bad at all.
No.
Yeah. And you had an attorney, and you probably got a referral to, the Vincent brothers, right? Through, they're part of the mastermind you're in, right?
That's right.
And, so finding someone, that already can do that and knows how to do that and has experience doing that. Don't go to your local attorney and say, hey, can you do this for me?
All right.
Probably don't even know, right?
Yeah, we use local attorneys to help with, because it's state specific, like our loan docs and stuff. So we use but as far as the big stuff, the SEC stuff, we just went with who we knew had a good reputation, and we got that through our network. So
yeah, that's perfect. And they kind of handled most of it for you. Probably had some consultations and said, what do you want this to be? And then you just and then they just put it all on paper into a legally binding document. Because at the end of the day, the reason, and there's I see a lot of people raising money online, and you have to be very careful about what you say online if you're raising money, because if you're raising money to buy real estate or whatever, that's a security. This SEC considers that a security, and you get to a certain point, and it's just like promissory notes, right? I have a couple college buddies that loan me some promissory notes in small amounts, right? But I don't, that's it. It's just limited to them. We've had a long relationship for a long, long time. If I start taking on more money, I need to do a PPM. I need to go through that, because you can get yourself into hot water on that. I've heard of people getting into hot water.
Yeah.
Like that.
And that was something we weren't that familiar with early on. And there's a big difference. So if you're setting up a fund, you have to identify right from the beginning, and you can change this. You can do, but you have to identify it, whether you're going to be a 506B or a 506C.
Mm-hmm.
506B is kind of like a friends and family fund, where you cannot, what they call, generally solicit it. So if I was a 506B, I could not talk about this fund on your podcast because I have no history with the folks. I couldn't market the fund on the podcast.
Yes.
And ask for money. We set it up as a 506C, which allows us to generally solicit, but what we give up is we can only bring in accredited investors by being a C, which means, and we've had to turn away people that didn't necessarily or quite meet the thresholds to be accredited. So that's very important. And we knew that we wanted to grow this thing to a point where we were going to have to advertise and market it. So we wanted to be able to solicit it. So we right out of the gate went with a C. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then there's another one out there. Was it the C3? What is the crowdfunding one? What is that one?
Yeah, we didn't even look into that, but yes, there's actually a couple more ways to structure these. You could do a blend of the two, or they mentioned we could have started off as a B and just hustled all the people around us that we knew and then evolved it into a C. But we just right out of the gate didn't want the headache of all that. We just want to kind of dig our heels in. This is what we are, and this is how we're going to grow it.
Yeah, and like you said, you find a good, competent attorney, have them set that stuff up for you, because you need to make sure that you got someone who knows what they're doing to set that up. But once you unlock that takes you to the next level. You're legit. But it also holds you to a high standard, right? I'm sure you've got certain audits you got to do, third-party books audits and stuff like that, as part of the SEC requires that. Right. So, yeah, that's cool, man. Well, I love that you've kind of taken it from doing kind of your first, you mentioned the single wide, right before we got on our call. I buy mobile homes. I have a website, gamobilehomebuyers.com, and I buy mobile homes, and I was doing a lease option agreement on a single wide I bought in a park a few months ago. I paid $3,000 for the single wide. It's in very good condition, 1985, but in really good condition. I was surprised when I saw it. Paid $3,000 for this thing. The park allows rentals. Got $400 a month in lot rent. But we went out and we found someone to buy it. I'm selling it to her for $15,000. She's giving me $1,500 down next week when she moves in. I'm getting half my money back, right?
Right.
And then she's paying me 10% interest for the next 3 years. It's a 3-year note. And then boom, like once she pays me off, I won't get those payments anymore. But for the next 3 years, and I vetted her out. I checked her income and her taxes and all that stuff. And I'll get, 400 and something bucks a month, every single month for the next years.
Beautiful.
On a single wide trailer.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about a bit of maintenance, anything. Like, she owns it. You're just the bank. And,
Right.
Worst case scenario, she defaults, you just take it back and repeat the process.
And we do like I learned this from a buddy of mine. We basically do a teaser, like a lease option period for the first like 6 months. And then we roll it into a seller finance after that. So that it's like a trial period, and I can evict them if they, because if they're going to default, they're probably going to default pretty quickly,
Pretty early. Yeah.
And that's that trial period. And then we'll just apply her payments to the seller finance.
I love that. I love it. Yeah.
Flip it at the end. I do a lot of like, I love owner finance notes on mobile homes. Those are like my favorite for sure. Love them.
Yep.
So if anybody wants to get a hold of you, Jason, what's the best way? Obviously you mentioned your podcast, Burning the Ships, right?
Yep.
What's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
So I'm on Facebook and Instagram, just my name, Jason Seward. And then we have 2 separate social media platforms. So for our real estate business, it's 608B Capital, and that's on all the platforms. And then for the podcast, it's Burning the Ships. And so all that's out there. And the 608B Capital is our fund. And a lot of people get confused by that name. They think it's some kind of finance code or something. Bill Phillips, my partner, and I, we went to college together, and that was our apartment number, 608B. So,
there you go.
That's what we went with. But
there you go. There's always some story behind that. Like my company, my main flipping company, Arborview Properties, I was trying to think of a company name, and I walked out on my back porch at my house, and I was on a wooded lot, and I'm looking around at the trees, and like, oh, Arborview. There we go.
Beautiful.
Boom. Just came to me. It's like that.
Right.
So
good stuff.
Man, I really appreciate you coming on today. Before we go, this is the Probate House Guy podcast. You don't specifically do probate deals, but you've stumbled upon a few over time. What did you like? We got to talking about it on your podcast, but you're like, wait a second, that was a really good deal. So why don't you talk about kind of that just briefly, like how that worked?
Yeah, so it was it's the only probate deal I've bought in all the properties we bought. But this is before Bill and I had partnered. I had been strictly doing the BRRRR strategy, so I was trying to hold everything.
Yeah.
But this one deal came to me. It was a probate deal. It didn't make sense to hold it. It was a higher end house in a higher end neighborhood, but it was the numbers as a flip worked out tremendously. It was a quick in and out. And, so I was able to, this has been 7 years ago. So I don't remember all the details, but it was a home run, and it was a clean deal, clean transaction. I think from the time I closed on purchase to the time it was back on the market was 60 days. And I made a really good chunk of money. I think, I don't mind sharing it, but I think that deal profited me after everything about $60,000. So
that's killer, man.
Good deal. Yeah.
They could be really good. That's why I just kind of focus on them, because they're just always, they're longer life cycle. In my case, when I'm taking them from you bought it kind of after the fact, but like I'm buying them direct to seller.
Right.
So it's a longer life cycle. But when we do, like they've always been my best deals.
Yeah. And just here today, talking to you on my podcast, and now thinking about it, like it's one of those things that it was so clean and so good. I'm too dumb to go back and try it again, So now I'm thinking like, all right, let me dig into this a little bit. We might be able to
more of that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And you're a good resource for that. So I'll definitely keep in touch. So
hit me up, man. Maybe we can, we need to do some mailing campaigns at the Outer Banks and try to find some probate properties on the Outer Banks, right?
When you're ready to do that, just call me up. I'm ready to go, brother. So
let's do it, man. Well, hey, Jason, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate your knowledge. You shared so much about your journey and a fund, right? Some people don't even know what a fund is. So thanks for coming on, man, today. I really appreciate it.
Yep. I appreciate you having me, man, and look forward to keeping up with you.
Cool. Awesome. Well, hey guys, like I mentioned on every podcast, we have a done for you marketing package. If you're interested in getting into the probate niche, maybe you're already in the probate niche, or you're looking to get into that niche or bolt onto your business, we offer a done for you marketing package where we will handle all of your probate marketing from a 3-pronged approach. So if you're interested in learning more about that, how we can help you, go to probatehouseguy.com and fill out the form. Thanks again, guys. Have a good day.